The village of Wulfsdorf, circa 1889. Wulfsdorf was a small settlement situated on the northern edge of Mecklenburg-Schwerin, not far from the marshlands that crept toward the Baltic coast. Records from the Kirchenbuch der Pfarrei Wulfsdorf, Parish Book, 1832 to 1909, describe it as a hamlet of 37 households, poor in resources but rich in suspicion. The soil was sandy and thin, rye and potatoes grew reluctantly. Most families kept goats or a single cow, selling curd and butter in the weekly Rostock market. Architecture was uniform, low timber-framed houses with sod roofs, patched with tarred canvas against rain. Smoke often lingered above the crooked chimneys, trapped by the damp fog rising from the marsh. Winters were long, and stories of wolves, though exterminated decades earlier, remained vivid in the dialect tales. The cultural fabric of Wulfsdorf was marked by Lutheran austerity, but beneath the sermons lurked older habits. Candle offerings at crossroads, muttered charms against the damp fever, and whispers of der schwarze Hunger, the black hunger, persisted. It was within this landscape that the Kröger family established their reputation. First for generosity, then for something far darker. According to a tax registry from 1889, household of Andreas Kröger, day laborer, wife Lisa, age recorded as 39, stature remarkable, over 100 kilograms by estimation. Children, Johanna, 13, Wilhelm, 10, and infant Friedrich. This Lisa Kröger would later be described in testimonies as a woman of unfathomable appetite, both at table and elsewhere. The children were said to share her voracity, gnawing marrow bones long after the broth had been drained. In the first years, neighbors recalled only her laugh, like a cask rolling on stone. But behind closed shutters, unusual odors drifted. Scorched fat, iron-rich steam, sometimes at hours when no cooking was customary. The first disappearance came in the winter of 1891, when a traveling button seller, Heinrich Miller, failed to reach Rostock. His cart was found abandoned near Wulfsdorf, wheels sunk in thawing mud. The parish register lists him tersely. March 14, 1891. Heinrich Müller, presumed dead. Cause, misadventure. But in the private diary of Pastor Johannes Hinrich, dated 3 days later, another line is found. The Kröger household feasted last night. Too much smoke from their chimney, and the smell. God preserve us. It clung to my cassock as sin.
If you enjoy videos like this, give it a like and subscribe.
The Vanishing Peddlers, 1891 to 1896. Between 1891 and 1896, at least 7 itinerant workers vanished along the trade road that skirted the marshes of Wulfsdorf. In police correspondence from Rostock, Inspector Karl Österreich wrote, "The region of Wulfsdorf is singular in its record of disappearances. Most other hamlets report 1 or 2 such cases in a decade. Wulfsdorf has accrued 7 in less than 5 years, and all within the radius of 1.5 kilometers. Weather and wolves do not account for so precise a pattern." The missing men were of a similar type: solitary, poor, easily overlooked. A shoemaker carrying lasts to the next town, a farmhand returning from harvest, a Prussian soldier on furlough. In each case, the trail of belongings ended near the northern ditch road, an embanked lane that ran directly past the Kröger property. Villagers whispered, but offered little to the gendarmes. Wulfsdorf was notorious for its secrecy, bound by kinship and fear of outside authority. The Kröger matriarch, Lise, had by then grown infamous for her enormous strength, lifting hay bales alone, splitting wood with a single stroke. Children in the village mocked her behind her back with the rhyme, "Lisa, Lisa, never thin, eats the marrow, eats the skin." Though most dismissed it as cruel folklore, some noticed the Kröger children gnawed on pig bones until they splintered, a habit unsettling in its intensity. The Kröger house itself was an object of gossip. Unlike most, which faced the road with open windows, theirs had shutters permanently nailed shut. Only the kitchen chimney smoked, often at odd hours. Hunters claimed to have heard low, muffled cries carried on the fog at night, though no official report confirmed this. By 1894, suspicions reached a peak when a local girl, Anna Marie Witt, age 16, vanished after delivering milk. Her father testified, "I saw her pass the Kröger yard. She waved once, then was gone. No footprints led beyond, though the mud was soft. When I asked at their door, Frau Lisa smiled too broadly, her teeth red as if from cherries. Yet I saw no cherries." Authorities searched the Kröger property briefly, but found nothing more than common farming implements and salted pork hanging in the cellar. The case was marked inconclusive. Privately, however, Inspector Österreich noted in his report, August 1894, "The cellar beams are stained darker than seems natural, though the family claims it is only beet juice. I am unconvinced. The odor lingers, metallic, like the hospital ward after amputation." The Witt family pressed for justice, but within a year, both parents died of swamp fever, leaving only rumor as their daughter's memorial. By 1896, stories hardened into something more than gossip. In a tavern in Rostock, a carter described overhearing the Kröger children singing in the fields. "We roast the flesh, we drink the broth, and keep the bones for winter." Whether invention or truth, such verses circulated widely, cementing the Krögers' reputation as the Die Fresser von Wulfsdorf, the Eaters of Wulfsdorf.
The first investigation, 1901. By the turn of the century, Wulfsdorf had acquired a reputation in surrounding villages as a place to be avoided after dark. Carters altered their routes to bypass its marsh road, and traders carried knives or traveled in groups. The Kröger family, meanwhile, had grown. Lisa's eldest, Johanna, now 19, was described as heavy-set, with the same broad shoulders and ruddy cheeks as her mother. Wilhelm, 15, was already taller than most grown men, and the youngest, Friedrich, 9, was said to be silent and hungry-eyed. On April 17, 1901, a farmhand named Matthias Döring failed to return home after delivering grain sacks to the Wulfsdorf mill. His body was never recovered, but his horse was found tied near the Kröger boundary fence. Villagers demanded intervention, and at last the Schwerin Criminal Police dispatched Inspector Emil Kraus to conduct a formal inquiry. Kraus's notes, preserved in fragmentary form in the Landesarchiv Mecklenburg, contain some of the most detailed descriptions of the Kröger household. The residence stands at the edge of the marsh road, timber warped and sodden with years of damp, windows nailed with planks, interior air fetid, sour with smoke, and what I must describe as animal effluence. The kitchen hearth was blackened beyond reason. Suspicious stains observed along the stone threshold, color dark brown. Kraus interrogated Lisa directly. She is described as weighing close to 105 kilograms, body immense, hands calloused as shovels. In his deposition, when questioned about the missing Düring, Frau Kröger laughed, exposing teeth uneven, several blackened. She stated, "Men vanish in the marsh. We cannot eat fog." At this, her son Wilhelm snickered, which seemed ill-timed. Neighbors testified to odd nocturnal activity, wagons entering the Kröger yard but never leaving, muffled hammering from the cellar at night, livestock carcasses discarded without signs of butchering. The most damning testimony came from Martha Schult, a servant girl who claimed to have worked for the family briefly in 1899. The Frau kept a pot always boiling. I was not permitted to lift the lid. Once I disobeyed, and inside I saw bones too long for pig and the hand of a man, white and stiff. She struck me with the ladle and bade me never speak. I fled that very night. Despite this statement, Kraus struggled to secure physical evidence. The Krögers permitted only limited access to their cellar, citing family preserves. Barrels smelled strongly of brine and iron, but no corpses were discovered. Without bodies, the case could not proceed. In his final report, June 1901, Kraus concluded reluctantly, "Suspicion remains grave, but proof absent. The Kröger family is feared by all, yet shielded by silence and decay. Wulfsdorf itself seems complicit, whether by ignorance or terror. I recommend continued observation, though the stench of this case offends me more than any I have known." The file was closed. The Krögers carried on undisturbed. Yet, within the following decade, their cellar would resurface in darker testimony, this time with more than rumor to sustain the accusations. The Bones in the Marsh, 1907. The winter of 1907 was especially cruel in Mecklenburg. Snow crusted the reed beds, and the marshes froze in jagged patterns that cracked beneath the weight of cattle. When the thaw came in early March, villagers noticed something disturbing near the drainage ditch north of the Kröger farm, the rib cage of what appeared, at first, to be a deer protruding from the black slush. On March 9th, a farm boy named Ernst Albrecht reported the find to the parish pastor. Upon retrieval, however, it was discovered the bones were human. Several ribs, a section of spine, and fragments of femur. The coroner from Rostock, Dr. Wilhelm Mertens, performed an analysis recorded in his report. Ochtenstock, 44, 1907, Landesarchiv. The remains are decidedly human. Male. Estimated age 25 to 35 years. Bones bear scoring consistent with blade marks. The marrow appears to have been extracted with force. Weathering suggests burial in marsh ground no longer than 3 years. This discovery reopened old wounds, particularly the disappearance of Matthias Döring in 1901. His brother Christian testified at an inquest convened in Rostock. "I knew those boots when they showed me. The leather was patched twice at the heel, my own stitching. They said the bones were too scattered to prove, but I know they are Matthias, and I know who took him." Suspicion once again fell upon the Krögers. Their farm was searched more extensively this time, under orders from the Schwerin magistrate. Witness accounts from the constables describe unsettling scenes. A root cellar with shelves of jars, many unlabeled, filled with thick congealed fat. A butcher's block, scarred with deep grooves, far beyond ordinary kitchen use. A bundle of clothing scraps hidden in a loft. Caps, aprons, and fragments of uniform cloth, none belonging to known villagers. Yet once more, no intact body was discovered. Lisa Kröger maintained her innocence, explaining the jars as pig fat rendered for soap and the block as merely well used. The clothes, she insisted, were rags taken from markets in Rostock. Nevertheless, rumors swelled. One villager, the wheelwright, August Meyer, claimed, "When the marsh thawed, I saw Frau Kröger dragging something wrapped in sacking at night. It left a trail, as if leaking. By morning the crows were thick upon that spot, yet when I went, there was nothing." The investigation, while more serious than that of 1901, was once again inconclusive. Bureaucracy stalled prosecution, and without a definitive corpse, the magistrates hesitated to press charges. But the story spread beyond Wulfsdorf. The Schweriner Volkszeitung, in an article dated April 2, 1907, ran the headline, "Eaters of Wulfsdorf? Human bones in the marsh." Though couched in cautious language, the paper described the Krögers as a family apart, heavy of body, quick of appetite, shrouded in suspicion. From this moment, the Krögers ceased to be mere local rumor. They became a regional legend, feared and mocked in equal measure. Children in nearby towns recited at night, "Through Wulfsdorf mist they come, hungry mouths that never numb. Hide your bread and hide your kin, else the Krögers take you in." The official inquiry closed quietly by summer, with no charges filed, but whispers persisted that certain evidence had been suppressed, whether from incompetence, corruption, or fear. And so, though outwardly life returned to normal, the Krögers were watched ever more carefully. What no one realized then was that the family's next victim would not be a stranger, but one of their own. The Daughter's Confession, 1912. By 1912, the Kröger family was firmly entrenched in its isolation. Lisa, now in her early 50s, remained the household matriarch, broad-shouldered, weighing over 110 kilograms, according to a census note. Her children were grown: Johanna, 23, Wilhelm, 20, and Friedrich, 16. All still lived under her roof. That spring, a strange event unsettled the quiet complicity of Wulfsdorf. Johanna Kröger fled the family home. On May 4th, she appeared barefoot at the parish house, her apron torn and her face streaked with blood. Pastor Heinrich Vogt, who recorded her testimony in his notebook, Archive, Wulfsdorf, Volume 2, described her as hysterical, near delirium, but insistent. Her words, though fragmented, form one of the most chilling accounts tied to the case. "She makes us eat what is not swine. The broth, it is not swine. I saw the arm in the brine, nails still upon it. Wilhelm laughed. He tore it apart like a bone from the butcher. Mother says the flesh is blessed, that it keeps us strong when fields are barren. She said we are chosen to survive the black hunger, but I can no longer swallow." Vogt, disturbed but cautious, reported the matter to the district constable. Yet the constable dismissed it as female hysteria, noting that Johanna had a tendency toward melancholia. Nonetheless, she was taken to stay with relatives in Schwerin, where she repeated her claims to 2 physicians. Dr. Otto Lamm, in a medical letter dated May 17, 1912, wrote, "The patient speaks obsessively of her family consuming human remains. She describes cellars with barrels of salted flesh and voices in the night bidding her partake. While such utterances may be delusional, her terror is genuine. I note also her physical health. She is robust, not malnourished. The paradox is striking." For a brief time, officials considered reopening the Kröger investigation. But once again, the absence of tangible proof stalled the effort. Johanna herself later recanted, writing to her mother in September 1912 from Schwerin, "Forgive me, Mutti. I was sick of mind. They made me speak lies. I will not again." She returned to Wulfsdorf the following year. Still, fragments of her confession lingered in local memory. Villagers who had once muttered suspicions now spoke more boldly, that the Krögers had survived lean winters without slaughtering livestock, that smoke from their chimney always carried a sour-sweet stench unlike pork or beef, that dogs refused to enter their yard. A particularly telling remark came from Miller's apprentice Franz Reuter, recorded in a tavern quarrel, as later noted in a 1915 police file. "I saw her, the fat Frau, stirring a vat in the yard. It boiled with things not fit for any beast, and when she saw me looking, she smiled with grease on her chin." Although dismissed as drunken exaggeration at the time, the persistence of such reports lent Johanna's testimony a strange credibility. What followed was silence, outwardly at least. The Krögers resumed their lives, shrouded by the village's reluctance to confront them. But behind shuttered windows, the family's bond of secrecy had been cracked. By the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, another wave of disappearances would reignite the case, and this time, the trail of evidence would stretch beyond rumor and into the chaos of war itself. The war years, 1914 to 1918. The First World War brought both scarcity and distraction. While young men of Mecklenburg marched east and west, Wulfsdorf remained largely untouched by the front lines, its marshes far from battlefields. Yet hunger stalked the countryside. By 1916, bread was stretched with sawdust, meat rations cut to near nothing, and potatoes rotted in cellars before winter's end. It was in this climate of deprivation that the Krögers thrived. Lisa, now in her mid-50s, commanded her household like a general. Wilhelm was conscripted in 1915, but declared unfit after 3 months due to nervous agitation. Friedrich, barely 18, was never drafted. Both sons remained at home. Neighbors whispered that while their livestock herds dwindled, the Kröger larder seemed miraculously stocked. The smell of roasting fat rose from their chimney even during the hardest weeks of rationing. A village widow, Greta Bode, testified years later, statement to Schwerin investigators, 1924. "They ate when none of us ate, always smoke from their roof, always broth on the wind. And the dogs, they whined at night, clawing the fences, but not for pork. It was a smell older, heavier. We turned away, for who dares ask a wolf where he found his meat?" Between 1915 and 1917, at least 4 deserters were reported missing in the district. Men who had fled their regiments often moved through back roads, trading labor for a night's shelter. In August 1916, a Prussian corporal, Heinrich Rasch, was last seen begging for food outside Wulfsdorf. His uniform cap was later found in reeds near the Kröger farm. Pastor Vogt noted in his diary, August 28, 1916, "The war has given cover to much cruelty. I fear that our village shelters a horror greater than shells or rifles. The Krögers never lack. Their cellar must be deeper than it appears, for it consumes more than a family's share. Last night I thought I heard a shout cut short, carried on the fog. My prayers falter." Despite such fears, the chaos of wartime bureaucracy meant no thorough investigation was launched. Police were occupied with deserters, spies, and smuggling. Disappearances in a poor marshland hamlet seemed trivial compared to the empire's collapse. By war's end in November 1918, Wulfsdorf had shrunk further. Many men never returned, either buried in France or lost to famine. The Kröger family, however, remained intact, their house still shuttered, their smoke still rising. It was during the hungry post-war winter of 1919 that the first direct evidence of slaughter surfaced. A villager, Karl Jentz, scavenging firewood near the Kröger property, stumbled upon a refuse pit partially thawed by the spring. In his police deposition, March 2, 1919, "I saw bones, yes, bones too big for goat or swine. They were cracked open, marrow sucked, and there was a skull half buried with the jaw torn away. I ran until my lungs split." When constables investigated, the pit had been filled and covered with lime. The Krögers claimed it was waste from butchering pigs. Officials, exhausted by ration riots and political unrest, filed no charges. Still, whispers swelled into something darker. In taverns from Schwerin to Rostock, deserters and widows alike traded the tale. The eaters of Wulfsdorf, who fattened themselves while Germany starved. By the early 1920s, the Kröger legend had grown beyond rumor into a full-blown folk terror, a story told to frighten children and deter travelers. Yet beneath the folklore, fragments of testimony remained in archives, fragments pointing to something grimly real. The next chapter of that reality emerged in 1924, when a new disappearance forced officials to open the Kröger cellars once more. This time, they would not emerge empty-handed.
The Cellar Search, 1924. On February 11, 1924, a traveling tinker named Jacob Henning was reported missing after leaving the Rostock Road and cutting across the marsh track near Wulfsdorf. He had been seen in the tavern at Brinkman's Crossing, carrying a heavy pack of pots and pans, and several villagers swore he intended to lodge in Wulfsdorf for the night. He never arrived at his next stop. The following week, a farm boy discovered a rusted kettle and a bloodied strip of cloth snagged on the Kröger fence. This was enough to prompt the Rostock Criminal Police to reopen the case that had lain dormant since 1907. This time, a team of 6 constables, led by Inspector Paul Bremer, arrived in Wulfsdorf with authority to search the Kröger property in its entirety. Their official search report, Land Archive Mecklenburg, Case File 19-1924, is chilling in its detail. At 14:30 on 24 February, entry was forced into the Kröger cellar, the door being heavily barred from within. The air was immediately oppressive, saturated with a rancid odor of salt and decay. Illumination revealed shelves laden with jars containing preserved fat and what appeared to be organ meats, though labels were absent. A large wooden vat, sealed with pitch, contained brine solution in which floated 2 human forearms stripped of flesh. Several bones, cracked longitudinally, were discovered in a barrel nearby. Inspector Bremer's deposition adds, "The eldest son, Wilhelm, upon discovery, exhibited no distress. He remarked only, 'It is winter food. You will starve sooner than we.'" Further examination of the cellar revealed a false wall behind which lay a narrow chamber. Inside were remnants of clothing, uniform tunics, caps, aprons, all soaked in grease. A child's shoe was also recovered, though no child was reported missing in Wulfsdorf during that period. The Kröger matriarch, Lisa, was arrested along with her 2 sons. Johanna, curiously, was absent, and neighbors claimed not to have seen her since the previous autumn. When questioned, Lisa laughed, stating, "The girl has gone to her husband. She was always weak in stomach." Yet no marriage was ever recorded, and Johanna's name vanishes from all civil registries after 1923.
The trial, held in Schwerin in June 1924, attracted journalists from across Germany. The prosecution presented jars of human remains as evidence, alongside the testimony of villagers, and Pastor Vogt, now an old man, who stated under oath, "I heard them speak at table of meat from the road. I begged God for courage to expose them, but the village itself is bound by silence. We have lived with a shadow among us for 30 years." Despite the damning evidence, defense attorneys argued the remains could not be conclusively tied to specific victims. With post-war famine still fresh in memory, they hinted that survival, not malice, might explain the Kröger's deeds. The verdict shocked many. Wilhelm and Friedrich were sentenced to 10 years of hard labor for abuse of corpses, while Lisa, declared mentally unfit, was committed to the provincial asylum at New Strelitz. Yet the story did not end there. Within 2 years, Lisa was dead. Her asylum records note, "Patient deceased 3 March 1926 after prolonged refusal of food." She repeated constantly, "They are still hungry. They wait at the door." Meanwhile, rumors spread that the brothers, even in prison, boasted of their meals in Wulfsdorf, frightening other inmates with tales of marrow and broth. And then in 1930, when Friedrich was released early for good behavior, the legend of the Krögers flared back to life. For soon after his return, disappearances resumed. The Return of Friedrich, 1930 to 1933. By 1930, Germany was deep in economic turmoil. The Weimar Republic teetered, unemployment soared, and hunger once again stalked the countryside. Into this chaos stepped Friedrich Kröger, newly released from prison after serving only 6 years of his 10-year sentence. Unlike his brother Wilhelm, who died in custody of pneumonia in 1928, Friedrich returned to Wulfsdorf a free man at just 27 years old. He inherited the crumbling family homestead, its cellar sealed by court order, but its reputation intact. Locals muttered that the fat house breathes again. Constable records note his presence, but little else. Officially, he lived alone, working as a farmhand. But villagers soon whispered of visitors to his house at night. Drifters, unemployed men seeking work, a pair of traveling salesmen who never reappeared. A particularly disturbing testimony comes from a dairyman, Hans Becker, who delivered milk to the outskirts of Wulfsdorf in November 1931. "I saw him at dusk, stirring something in a black pot in the yard. It smoked heavy, with a smell not of beef nor swine, but of burnt leather and iron. He waved at me with a hand slicked red, as if in greeting. I did not stop again." Disappearances resumed in the area. October 1930, a vagabond, identified only as Schmidt, vanished. His last known lodging was in Wulfsdorf. May 1931. 2 men selling knives were reported missing en route to Rostock. One of their satchels was later found near the Kröger marsh ditch. January 1933. A municipal clerk traveling from Wulfsdorf failed to arrive at his post. His bicycle was discovered at the edge of the marsh, wheel tracks ending abruptly near the Kröger yard. Police once again investigated, but now the political situation was shifting. The new Nazi authorities prioritized order and sought to suppress stories that painted rural Germany as degenerate. Inspector Bremer, who had led the 1924 search, submitted a frustrated memorandum, March 1933. It is intolerable that the same farm, the same name, is linked again and again to vanishings, yet higher offices instruct me to dismiss the matter as vagrancy. There is something rotten in Wulfsdorf, and it is not the marsh alone. Villagers, too, sensed the tightening of silence. One elderly woman, Clara Witt, widow of the girl who had vanished decades earlier, muttered in a statement never filed officially. "They say the Reich needs no ghost stories, but I tell you, the Krögers are no story. My Anne-Marie screams still under that earth." Friedrich himself was last officially documented in August 1933 when he signed for delivery of roofing tar in Rostock. After that, his name disappears from all registries. Some said he emigrated east, others swore he was taken away quietly by authorities who wanted the scandal buried. When the house was finally abandoned, sometime around 1936, scavengers entered. What they found was never formally catalogued, but a later folkloric account. Chronik des Kreises Wulfsdorf, 1952, describes cellars half flooded, walls streaked with grease, and a pile of bones under lime, too many for any swine. A chair gnawed through at the arms, and in the corner a pot sealed with pitch, which none dared open. The Kröger farm collapsed into ruin, swallowed by reeds and mist, yet the legend endured. Even into the 1950s, children of Mecklenburg warned one another. If you walk by Wulfsdorf marsh at night, you will hear her laugh, the fat Frau stirring her pot, and if you follow the smell, you will not return. Folklore and Suppression, 1936 to 1950. After 1936, the Kröger house ceased to exist as a living household. Reeds consumed the yard, timbers sagged, and the marsh road itself was rarely traveled. Officially, the family vanished from registries. Lise, dead; Wilhelm, dead in prison; Johanna, missing; Friedrich, disappeared. Yet their shadow lingered. The Nazi regime actively suppressed tales that painted rural Germans as primitive or degenerate. Stories of cannibal families contradicted the propaganda of hardy peasant virtue. In local archives, police files on the Krögers were quietly sealed or destroyed. Inspector Bremer, who had long pursued the case, was reassigned in 1937 and later died in an air raid on Hamburg. His private notes, however, survived in fragments passed to a cousin after the war. One entry dated 1934 reads, "They told me to forget Wulfsdorf, to call it vagrancy, but I still dream of that cellar, the smell of pitch and brine. The fat Frau is dead, yes, but her sons smiled when I questioned them, as if they had only begun." Meanwhile, among villagers, the legend grew sharper. Farmers warned children not to stray into the marsh, else the eaters will fatten you up. Hunters spoke of hearing strange knocks echoing across the fog at night. During the war years of 1939 to 1945, Wulfsdorf itself withered. Allied bombers never bothered with so small a place, but young men left and never returned. The marsh swallowed more fields. By 1948, only 11 households remained. The Kröger farm was a ruin by then, but even in ruins it retained a strange gravity. In 1950, a regional folklorist, Dr. Erich Lang, visited the site for his Chronik des Kreises Gusterov. His notes are sparse but telling. The cellar, though collapsed, exudes a foul damp unlike mere rot. Villagers refuse to approach. I was told by one old woman, "She is still there, stirring the pot, waiting for the hungry years to return." Lang collected children's rhymes still sung in nearby villages. "Kröger's broth is black and hot. Don't you drink from Kröger's pot, else your bones they'll salt away for another winter's day." Thus, in the years of rebuilding, the Kröger story slipped into the category of folklore, a terror half believed, half denied. But whispers persisted of sealed police files, of bones miscatalogued, of a family's crimes deliberately erased. Modern Investigations 1951 to present. After the war, as East Germany tightened its control over Mecklenburg, Wulfsdorf was largely abandoned. The marsh road was decommissioned in 1952, and the ruins of the Kröger farm sank further into reeds. Official records gave the village only a line: depopulated, structures removed. Yet the Kröger legend never disappeared. In the 1960s, folklorists at the University of Rostock collected oral accounts from elderly residents. One, Anna Kröger, no relation, then 84, recalled, "I was a girl when Johanna ran screaming to the pastor. She said her mother made her eat the hand of a man. Everyone said she was mad, but I saw her eyes. They had seen it. The asylum never kept her. They never found her. Ask where she went. Ask." In 1987, the construction crew draining parts of the marsh uncovered a scatter of bones. Most were animal, but among them were 4 human femurs, each split lengthwise. State archives record the find briefly, attributing it to war dead. The bones vanished into storage, never tested. In 2003, a local journalist, Katrin Voigt, attempted to reopen the story for the Ostsee Zeitung. She submitted requests to the Landesarchiv for the 1924 Kröger case files, only to be told the documents were lost during wartime. Weeks later, she received an unsigned envelope containing a single copy of Inspector Bremer's note, 1934. "The fat Frau is dead, but her sons smiled." Voigt's article was never published. She died suddenly in 2004, officially from a cerebral aneurysm. Among her papers, colleagues later found transcriptions of tavern songs about the Krögers and a line scrawled in her own hand. What if they survived through us? What if the hunger was never theirs alone? Today, the Kröger farm exists only as a mound of reeds. No visible structure remains, yet hikers and amateur ghost hunters claim strange phenomena: the odor of boiling fat, muffled laughter, and the sound of wood being chopped in the fog. Police deny any modern cases linked to Wulfsdorf. But among villagers in the region, the old rhyme still circulates, softened for children but still edged with dread. Hide your bread, hide your kin, or the Krögers take you in. And so the case of the Eaters of Wulfsdorf remains suspended, part documented crime, part suppressed scandal, part unquiet legend. Somewhere between history and folklore, their story endures. And whether one believes in cannibals or not, the marshes of Wulfsdorf remain empty, avoided, and unsettling.